Hey folks, you're welcome to my third review of a Valentine's Day YouTube Christian movie release, In Love with a Prostitute. Interesting title, isn't it? An interesting story too, especially because of the personality of the protagonist, Jide Williams, played by Ayo Siniman Olaleye. The movie was written by Emmanuel Olorunjubelo, directed by Adeoye Omoniye, and produced by Taiwo Ayola. As the self-explanatory title denotes, Jide falls in love with a prostitute, and it is a pleasing thing when we see how this love, so to say, purifies Sharon, played by Abiola Ojelabi. However, the whole process involved should not be overlooked in order for us not to misunderstand the message of the movie. I would say that this film uses Jide's life to show us the kind of mistakes one can make in marital choice, rather than using Jide's actions as a model for Christians to follow. On the surface, the situation looks like a prostitute was God's will for Jide, but this could really be misleading and easily misunderstood, especially with the biblical instance of Hosea and Gomer. So maybe the million-dollar question is, would God lead his child to a prostitute? Let's examine it. Proverbs 31 verse 12 enlightens us that a virtuous woman does her husband good and not evil all the days of his life. But what we find at the beginning of this movie is that Sharon makes Jide tell a lie to cover up something that he did not even have an idea about. For majority of In Love with a Prostitute, Jide shows himself as a novice in many ways. Thereafter, his actions are as erratic as the occasional choppy movements from scene to scene that made certain scenes look incomplete and inconclusive. Jide actually shows Sharon care and compassion, but his motives are questionable. Next thing we know, he's declared to his parents that he's in love with her. Now, let's look at this. He feels that there is something wrong with this love. He calls it a strange love. He tags it as madness, and he asks God for healing. Yet he goes ahead to propose to her, and it was only then that he thought to tell his pastor. That's preposterous. Unfortunately, it's like the pastor doesn't even do anything about it. From these, we can deduce that Jide has been entirely emotional in his marital choice. He hasn't deferred to God or a spiritual authority or even parental guidance concerning it. He clearly doesn't have peace about the union, so it's a wonder why he goes ahead. I deem it vital to state that the film is not trying to say that Jide has done the right thing. In any case, God does later on redeem the situation and makes something beautiful out of Sharon's life. A better way for Jide to have gone about it would have been for him to seek God and not be carnally minded. He might have fallen in love with a prostitute, but as a child of God, he should have sought to first of all reconcile her with God by showing her the love of Christ. In the movie, his care for her eventually touches her, and she begins to turn over a new leaf. For her, whether he married her or not, she wouldn't go back into prostitution. That should have brought Jide back to his senses. Her decision offered him the opportunity to come into the actual part that God might have intended him to play in her life, the role of a mentor. And who knows, in time, God might give the green light for the relationship to become something more. But the way Jide went about it, it was just like a relationship out of pity. The music of In Love with a Prostitute merits a mention because its theme song was quite good. I think though that such should not be used too often as, for example, a medium of transition from scene to scene. Instrumentals and background tunes that align with the moods of individual scenes should be used instead. The movie also introduces a nice element that tallies with the theme of the movie, a love song. Another commendable aspect of In Love with a Prostitute is the revelation scene, one whose instruction, wash the cup, Jide misinterprets to mean marry her, instead of preach the gospel to her, get her saved by the kindness you received from God. Talk of a salvation should have come before any discussion on marriage. Also remarkable was the acting of the ladies at the brothel. My own takeaway from In Love with a Prostitute is the actions of the so-called Christians in it. Judas' neighbor was so quick to tag his neighbor's prostitute when the real question should have been whether he had tried shining the light of the gospel of Christ on them. Of course, I know that there is need for caution, but are we actually reaching out? Are we really reaching out to people like that who need help, or we are just content to tag them and condemn them? Condemn, you know what I mean. Likewise, was Mrs. Williams seriously trying to pay Sharon off? That was so not Christ-like. I pray that God will help us all to be true ambassadors of the Lord Jesus Christ. Alright, we've come to the end of this review. Have you seen the movie? What did you think about it? Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. The link to the movie is in the description. Till the next review, stay blessed.